And we are live. Good evening, Stephen.
Good evening, Graham.
How are you doing? I'm going to fart with your little
I'm doing
box here.
I'm doing fucking great today.
That's good. So you've been exploring the joys of Jenkins pipelines, I understand.
Oh yeah, Jenkins pipelines and migrations in Django and lovely bits of the Java ecosystem
Nice.
and oh yeah. That's I can't remember who I was talking to. Oh, I went to an online nerd club um last week sometime,
Hmm.
and one of the guys there was saying that he didn't feel like he had we were talking about like different programming languages or something like that. I can't remember what the exact context was. And so I counted that that particular day I had written code in 11 different languages. And it's and it because it was a stream day. So I get to add one or two. On the other stream I usually get to add C and Rex.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
then on this stream Objective C, which I don't do a lot of
And then
outside
Scheme
of
once we get into the geek stuff later.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And you can add M4
Definitely.
if we ever end up having to fart about with autoconf.
Oh, is M4 when we cancel the stream?
Yeah, that's basically where we cancel the internet.
I actually really enjoyed M4. I did not enjoy dealing with AutoConf,
Yeah.
but when I worked at Neo4j, we had a whole bunch of like shell scripts that we were using for, all the various start the database, run this program and stuff, and they had to combine a command line of Java things
Mm.
to be able to run the database, and then they had to do some other things, and it ended up that M4 was actually the best choice for this because it was
Right.
it was literally one line of each script had changed and the rest of it was all the same
Mm.
preamble.
Mm.
And so it was a really nice way to work for that particular thing. But AutoConf as a user experience, type configure make install really is really really great.
Yeah, but like particularly
Actually,
given, I mean, what you're what you glossed over is type configure make install on any one of probably 20 to 30 different vendor systems, including like
right,
Windows NT and various Unixes and free software platforms.
right. Yeah, and that was the and that's really nice. But the problem for me was, when I had to modify things, then it becomes a bit of a nightmare. Are you connect? Do you have WireGuard running? I'm unable to connect.
Okay, let me just try pinging
Sorry, I
your
didn't do
host
that when
again.
we. All right.
So yeah, I get a response from your thing.
Oh.
Are you able to connect?
Oh. Okay. And now I do.
Yeah,
So
so
maybe.
this is a limitation of WireGuard. Yeah, while it is peer to peer, if you're behind a NAT, which I am because of how my home broadband works, your peer
Right.
has to reach out. Has to do the handshake before the other one even knows where the connection, where the endpoint is, in order to start kind of shuffling packets. So yeah,
Right. Okay.
I have to initiate a TCP connection to you before you can do one back. I
Okay.
should
And now I'm connected.
excellent. So just quick announcement for people on the stream. I can see a little red box on OBS that tells me that the network connection isn't great from my end, and around half of the frames getting dropped on the video. Hopefully the sound is all right, and hopefully the video shouldn't be too bad because we're looking at a static screen. Um, there isn't a whole lot of update here, but apologies if the quality is bad for those who are watching. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it. But you brought up, sort of in passing, a a really interesting topic that's kind of to do, I think, like, oh, hi Eugene19, great to have you here, and hi
Hello.
Matthew Scala. Right, everyone is trying one of multiple video sources to work out where they can actually watch it. I probably need to.
Capitalism gives you choice.
Yeah, exactly. I probably need to do more to that HLS player on rtmp.objcretain.com than just paste some example HLS playing code into a into an Emacs buffer. But now is not the time to start digging with that. But yeah, so I think like this sort of partly speaks to the evolution of Apple's ability to control its platform, which basically when they took on Next Step they couldn't do, and now can, and also to various ecosystem effects and to sort of expectations that people have. Is that you said that you had a bunch of different experiences in programming languages and were happy to jump around different programming languages in a day, and my experience of working in the Objective-C world is that like I certainly used multiple languages. Even if I was just doing Mac development, I would use Perl, Python, and Ruby, which were all built in. Objective-C was built in. C and C++ are kind of bundled with that. TCL was part of the stack, though I didn't use it very much. Obviously, like A shell like Bash or C shell, Apple script. I mean, JavaScript, and probably even PHP. Like I've run out of fingers just talking about the programming languages that were sort of bundled with Mac OS X, and I knew some programmers for whom Objective-C was their only sort of substantive programming language experience, and they tended to be like the less experienced software engineers whose first job was on a Mac development team, and so like that was the only thing that they had practically had to learn in order to do their job. And I knew plenty of people, particularly the people from the next world, who were like very comfortable with switching between different languages, including like WebScript and Java from the web objects perspective. But now I think that there's a large chunk of that community who are using Swift everywhere and are happy with Swift and like just need Swift. And that's not necessarily a critique of like those people. It's not necessarily the case that like polyglot programmers get their job done better, or like have some kind of superhuman cognition skills that single language programmers don't. Because obviously you can reach a massive addressable ecosystem with just Swift, or with just C# or with just Kotlin or Java, whichever one you pick. But there's definitely been a sort of there was a growth from actually I suppose on the classic Mac, people were mostly like there were a bunch of different languages, but a lot of people sort of picked one and and built their stuff with that, as we have done with C on the Amiga on the other stream, but like there was a sort of pre-Cambrian explosion at the launch of Mac OS X, just because it came out at that time when Perl and Python and PHP were all sort of popular and used in multiple contexts, like across scripting and across web development, and even for like building applications using things like Qt or TK or Cocoa. And then we've sort of come back down into a into a funnel, and it's either like not necessary or not beneficial anymore to use so many programming languages.
Yeah, I went to a meetup a few years ago. I think it was the year I moved here. It would have been like late 2015, early 2016, and I saw a talk from a guy who was a lead developer on some iOS app that also had a watch component that also had something else, a TV component or something like that, all in the Apple ecosystem. And we will save my reservation about whether this person could be, considered a lead developer or not. But based on his next statement was that he had been developing on watchOS for his entire career, and the only language he'd ever used was Swift. And in 2015, I thought, how do you go an entire career having started on watchOS and Swift? And it turns out that actually that's not, at that time, it was possible. I mean, to me, I mean, I remember sitting there thinking, watchOS is like 2 years old. But I think watchOS in 2015 was like 3 or 4 years old. But
yeah,
to
but
me, it was
Swift only came out in WWDC 2014, so yeah, that person's career was
right.
1 year long at that point.
Yeah, and then I actually remember now the conversation we were having about we were talking about the difference between sort of native development and React Native development, and one of the other guys at the meetup said, "Wait a minute, to use React Native to develop an iOS app, you have to understand Bash and Ruby and probably some Objective-C and probably some Swift, or at least one of the two. And then on top of that, and then JavaScript on top of that." And one of the other guys said, "No, I got handed a laptop with all that stuff installed on it,
Right.
and Xcode with the project installed. And so I only, or not Xcode, whatever they use, VS Code or whatever. And so I only use React Native, and then I just switch to Xcode to press the build button." And so, but to me, to do React Native development, I want to understand all of the bits that put it together. And I have never used CocoaPods where I haven't had to go and read some Ruby code that generates the CocoaPod.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've never and things like that. So, but it's weird to have sort of this. I mean, I'm not making the claim that you sort of have to understand every aspect of the stack all the way down, but I do feel like you kind of have to know what it's made of and have to be able to read a little bit. And
I do love when people do make that assertion, though, because I crack out my semiconductor physics knowledge. You're moved, motherfucker.
Right. Right. Or like I keep seeing like job ads from recruiters saying full stack development, and it's all JavaScript.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but where does full stack stop? And then there's also the things like how the sort of Overton window of programming languages has changed. I remember a little while ago, like in the last few years, I saw a job ad that said the backend developer required in PHP. And I thought, wait a minute, I thought like if I had to pick whether PHP was a front-end language or a back-end language, I would pick front-end. But I guess the Overton window of front-end and back-end has sort of shifted, because to me, front-end is dealing with, all things DOM related and, HTML and CSS basically, and the things that generate that. But these days, front-end, Matthew Scala says when he hears that sort of thing, he reaches for his soldering iron, right? And these days, it's completely changed where front end and back end really is defined by the individual project, which is better in many ways and worse in other ways. But it does lead to this idea that the phrase full stack means different things to different people, and all of the words sort of mean different things the longer you wait.
Yeah, my experience by and large recently has been that front end means the stuff that's running in the browser. What's interesting there is that WebAssembly is starting to take hold, and people are starting to do their front end stuff in like compiled languages. So I have heard, I have no confirmation for this, except that little birdies, and it is plausible that the iWork cloud UIs, so like the thing that's coming up to do FaceTime from the browser, the things that do Keynote and Pages, like iWork in the browser, are Objective-C applications that are compiled to WebAssembly and deployed to the browser that way. So, Apple no longer have their own like maintained back-end technology except for some legacy stuff. So, like they could be doing the sort of server-side work in any one of a number of like third-party or open source technologies. But the irony is they're more likely to be using JavaScript in on their server than in the browser. My screen went dark. I think that's just the blanket. Yes.
Oh, you need to wiggle the mouse.
Yeah.
It's funny that the screen goes dark there, but the VNC does not go dark.
Yeah. Now, I think I had in my X session file on the FreeBSD box the line that turns off the X screen blanking and just didn't port that when the hard drive died.
Ah, right. Yeah, it's always interesting to me the difference between these sort of one of the other follow-on discussions from this discussion was somebody asked me about Node, and I said, well, I've never actually used Node, and I can't imagine a situation where I would choose it. And I don't know why people choose it, so maybe you can tell me why you choose Node. And the guy said, well, I like writing the same language in the front end and the back end, and you can only do that in Node. And I remember that was one of the arguments that we used in favor of Seaside.
Yeah.
Was that you could write Smalltalk and then Smalltalk for the front end code that would emit JavaScript at certain points where it needed to. But I was always writing Smalltalk. And it was the same thing in Ruby on Rails. I wrote Ruby for the back end and the front end code, and it emitted JavaScript. And so it's amusing that we've sort of redefined this, you can write everything in one language, and maybe there are fewer sort of translations in Node because the browser is actually always executing JavaScript in all these cases, but we might be coming back around if WASM becomes more sort of widespread and used. We might be coming back around to this place where you can write in one language and it doesn't have to be JavaScript, but it's still executed by the browser.
Yeah,
that's an interesting thing.
It's a false argument anyway, because you can do that stuff with like ClojureScript and Clojure on the back end, and there's there are other examples. It's not really like worth exploring that. I mean, on projects that I have been involved with, I have never been, I think, the person to pick Node. I have deliberately picked React Native on projects before, where and Xamarin, and I've talked about why I picked Xamarin on my blog. But I currently work on a team with a very dilute like allocation of people to projects. We typically have like less than one full-time person per project. And so if that project is a mobile app, they are certainly going to have to develop for both platforms, and they are almost certainly not going to already be an expert at one of the two platforms. So I mean, I could do a UIKit app very quickly and then spend the project time writing an Android app. And then whatever poor sod I hand a project over to now has to maintain two code bases. Or I could do like the same in the same time. I could write one React Native application that's of the same standard as the Android application I would have written had I written both. And then the poor sod
Right.
only has to maintain one project, so ultimately, like, that's the better choice. And in that case, it's not the language. It's pretty much the availability of the and the sort of ubiquity of the tools in the ecosystem and the packages and so on across the multiple deployment platforms, which is the same sort of argument that you would have made for doing like a GNU Step app or a QTAP or whatever on for Unix in like 2004. Is okay, I write this thing, and then your AIX users can use it, and your Mac OS X users can use it, and your IRIX users can use it. Which,
Right.
So, like, back at that point, I was working for a company that did antivirus software, and we basically had a Windows product, a Unix product, which did Linux, SCO, AIX, HPUX, and Solaris, and then a Mac product, which was the Unix product plus a Cocoa UI, because that Unix part was was cross-platform and worked equally well on all the platforms, but there was an expectation for different UI on the Mac, and so you just added that layer on top. That's the sort of thing that you can do, and people who are embedded in one of the two platforms get butthurt when you say you can do that, because they say, well, why would you do that? If you just use your iKit, then everything works like an iOS app, and you're like, yes, and it doesn't work at all on an Android. And if you need it to work on Android, then you can build an Android UI on Android and an iOS UI on iOS using React Native, and build like the common bits out of common.
Yeah, and then they suck equally on all platforms. This is the
only if you don't build the iOS UI on iOS and the Android UI on Android. And that is certainly a common failure mode, is you build a common components UI on both. Actually, iOS and Android, it's kind of less important, because every app sort of takes over the entire experience, and there has been this sort of lack of commonality of experience between apps, and so the expectations for everything to be polished in the way that a Mac OS X user would think of it as polished are just no longer relevant.
Yeah, and that is the I hear from a lot of people, especially people who came from Windows to the Mac, who say, "Oh, well, I have all of the same applications that I used on Windows I have on a Mac, and a Mac is more stable, and the hardware is nicer, and so on, and the apps all work great." And of course, if you used Slack and Discord and Spotify and all of these applications on Windows, and then used those same applications on a Mac, that's right, the applications do behave very much the same as they would on Windows. And if you're a Mac user, they behave very differently than what you expect. But as I look at my dock, I can see that I have, half of the application, of the applications that are not written by Apple that behave like a Mac app, they're basically zero. And so behaves like a Mac app isn't really I wish it was a target, but behaves like a Mac app or behaves like all of the other apps on the same system, whether it's Mac or Windows or whatever. I wish they behaved more like Mac apps, because I can always tell. One person argued, well, you can't tell when you're using an Electron app. I can definitely tell. I can definitely tell when I'm using an Electron app, because the key bindings don't work. The key bindings that I expect to work in my application, the first time I try to use it, I realize, right, this is not a Mac app. Now I have to go and learn new key bindings. And so it is nice that you wind up getting the sort of the same suite of applications across different OSs, but we definitely lose something in the in usability and consistency that I always thought was important, and it certainly trips me up when I notice them. But the two applications that I use that are not provided by Apple that definitely feel like Mac apps, the two main ones are iTerm, which is for doing decidedly non-Mac things, and anti-RSI, which is just so old that it behaves like a Mac app, and fortunately, it also behaves like a GNU Step app. Um, and so I do wish we had those kinds of things, but it seems to be, in my on my cynical days, which are fewer than they used to be, I would blame sort of the proliferation of one designer per team. Back when we sort of when user interface design and user experience and stuff was sort of coming into when we were doing this kind of stuff and focusing on it in a general way, we got the human interface guidelines from Apple, and we got and even the Amiga had the cookbook or whatever it was called, the style guide, and things like that. And a button is a button is a button, and that's great. Until
Also, it took so much sodding code to write a gadget on the Amiga that it wasn't worth building a custom button. You would go out of business before you got it working.
Well, right, and then and also, but now it's every application that I use has a different button. It looks different, it behaves different. It doesn't even look like a button anymore because we've flattened everything out. The text labels are not necessarily text labels. They, and things like that. And I think what happened, if I had to guess, because the web was just sort of a blank canvas, and so companies in particular, would sort of decide on their style and the way things looked for their website, and then they wanted their mobile apps to match the website, and so every iOS app I have, I can tell which ones were done. It's harder on iOS than it is on a Mac. I can tell which applications. I can usually tell which applications on my phone were done using some kind of cross-platform toolkit, because there are some interactions that are not quite right or just feel kind of awkward. But it's always been this way. Smartphones have existed for less time than companies have been designing their own user interface idioms from scratch on every single project.
Yeah, and like the big platforms, none of them actually sort of designed their own user interface idioms. They all did like a somewhat of a clone of the Smalltalk windowing system. With I think there were probably more features missing from the Lisa or the Mac that the Smalltalk had and that they didn't, than that there were new features added. Probably the trash can was a new thing in the Mac, and probably the desktop metaphor. Although that does mean you had a desktop you had a trash can on your desktop, which I don't. And also, it meant, like on Windows, it meant you had wallpaper on your desktop, which is just fucking wrong. Like, nobody wallpapers their desktop. But so there was a long continuity of nobody designing these things until suddenly everybody designed these things, and I think that's an important sort of contextual point. It's not that like the Macintosh human interface guidelines are the best way to do graphical user interfaces. It's that they are like a kind of accepted lowest common denominator and reasonable, grounded assumptions. And the same is true for Windows, which is literally the Macintosh UI with enough changes that we no longer get sued. And the same is true of the Amiga UI and the Gem UI and God help us CDE and all those other things, is that like none of them is necessarily good, and we probably never iterated enough to find out what a good desktop UI is, because partly the conservatism of conforming with these established guidelines, and partly the conservatism of not evolving a platform to an unrecognizable extent once you've already got customers on it. So they're not great, but they are at least like expected.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I think made Next Step in particular, but other things as well. Visual Basic was another good example of this. One of the things that made I think that made those things successful in their own way, or nice to work with, I guess, if you don't want to assume that Next Step was successful, because I don't think it really was. But
it wasn't successful for Next.
Well, right. But one of the things that I think was really nice about that was, okay, well, I've got a button. I'm going to use the button, and I've got a list, and I'm going to use the list. And then I'm going to focus all of my attention on the widgets that I need for my specific case that are not already required. So if you had a CAD app, then the drawing space of the CAD part, space of the CAD part is what you would focus your attention on, and you've already got radio buttons and checkboxes and scroll bars and things like that you can reuse, and so the CAD application can focus on that. But when I don't know what the hell AutoCAD is written in, but it certainly feels like a web application where they reinvented all of the buttons, all of the UI widgets from scratch. And so they're not just maintaining, my assumption is they're not just maintaining a CAD a CAD editor surrounded by other reusable widgets. They're maintaining an entire graphical library, including the bits that they needed to create.
Yeah, and
I think there's a lot of value in having those reusable bits.
Yeah, there are cases where, and CAD may well be one of them, because CAD is quite an early application of graphical computers, where the metaphors they needed weren't exposed by the widget sets of something like the Mac. I think of Photoshop invented that marching ants rectangular selection view, where you drag and you get the rectangle with the handles and the sort of dashed line that moves around. And for a long time that would have been, and in fact maybe in Photoshop still is, custom rendered UI, because Photoshop was the only place where that was needed and the only place where it was written. But everyone learned it and then understood that was a good way to do rectangular selection on a image canvas, and then borrowed it, and eventually it became a system UI tool. The same story with pull to refresh on every mobile platform now. So that came from
wasn't that Twitterific, I think, that did it first?
And so they invented this interaction and then patented it, and then made the patent royalty free, so that everybody else could do it. And now it's built into the platform. So there is some extent to which you should occasionally go off piece and say the platform doesn't provide a good way to do this, so we need to design a good way to do this that won't adhere to platform standards. So, you may want to ask, is this being done thoughtfully, tastefully, or logically?
Yeah, absolutely. My complaint comes out when I wind up on a project and people are making buttons from scratch. That is a button is done. Maybe we can improve button, but I doubt it. That it's pretty simple, and I think it's pretty well done. Scroll bars have been reinvented a few times, for the new. We've moved them to different sides of the screen depending on which operating system you're on, and we've made them disappear when you don't need them on mobile, where screen space is limited and things like that. The scroll bars kind of mostly exist too, but I know a lot of people who've been writing software for comparatively not that long who have implemented a scroll bar, and that just seems really weird to me. And I really would like to see a situation where we have a rich toolkit of things that are reusable, so that we can focus on, on the things that are sort of your core competency. Because we talk about this a lot in, the sort of talking heads in agile land, often talk about, focus on your core competency, don't reinvent the wheel, and so on. um, and and I just picture people saying, "Oh, don't worry, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're busy reinventing buttons."
Yeah. I mean,
So
you're right. That is a point where you don't need you don't need to re-implement the button. You need to ask, is the button still a good metaphor for this user interface, or should we pick a different button? Like, just looking at the dock on
absolutely.
here, these work in slightly different ways from buttons. I mean, they're basically button-like controls, but they have different features. Like this little ellipsis that says you haven't started the thing. They have right-click actions, and clicking on them does different things based on activity. And they don't do the recess thing that a button does. They're just like static tiles, despite having that embossed effect. But that's because the dock is more of a menu to me, and the next menu is more of a menu to me than the horizontal menu bar on a on a Mac. Because think what a menu is. Have you ever been to a restaurant and they've handed you a strip of ticker tape with all of the menu options written out, horizontally from one end to the other, or at least all of the categories, and they go, we've got burgers. And you say, okay, hamburger, and then they give you the hamburger menu with with all the options for hamburgers on going in in a different direction. That's not how menus work. But all of these controls, I mean, you literally listed the ones that are based on physical electronics UIs, like buttons and radio gadgets. Those things are anciently skeuomorphic, because now in-car radios, most radios have touchscreens or little remote controls. You don't use radio buttons on a radio anymore. Nobody knows why they're called radio buttons. It's so that you can only pick one of AM or FM, or medium wave, long wave, and FM at one time. It's an obsolete metaphor, or depending on how you look at it, a more elegant weapon for a more civilized age. People know computers now.
Possibly, yeah.
Can we do away with with tabbed dividers like this is some kind of filing cabinet?
Yeah, I mean, that is I have two thoughts about this. You mentioned sort of radio buttons in cars. My car is particularly fucking annoying, the Outlander, because there are two knobs on the front of the radio unit. And I've had this car for going on 2 years. I still reach for the knob to turn the volume up or down. And that the two knobs are for the climate control. They turn so if I turn the knob to turn the volume up, I will reach and then turn the heat way up. And the other knob is for the other side, so because it's dual zone climate control.
Nice.
To change the volume is two touch sensitive touch sensitive touch areas that look like a speaker on just below the touch screen.
Yeah.
And that's annoying. So I don't even use that. I only ever turn the volume up and down in the car. After I turn the heat way up, I then switch to the steering wheel control.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that is easier, because it's so hard to hit the touch sensitive area for the volume up, volume down without hitting the button that tries to couple a new Bluetooth device or something that I never hit. and so it's really strange. I'm all for let's rethink all of these metaphors. One of the things that I started looking into again recently, because we've been watching the Next Generation, Star Trek: The Next
Yeah.
Generation, and I've been looking into the LCARS interface,
Right.
and I think
Right.
that sort of represents what does a touch sensitive computer interface look like that doesn't that deliberately throws away all of the 20th, 19th, 20th, 21st century metaphors, because that's what they were going for. And I'm not sure if it's a good interface, but it certainly seems like, okay, what would we get if we decided to throw away these metaphors? And I like thoughts like that,
Yeah.
but I don't want my bank to be saying, okay, let's throw away all of let's throw away the metaphors and the widgets that we're given and reinvent what a button means and what it does
Yeah.
and how it responds to touch.
Hollywood OS is a really interesting source, like, in general, not just LCARS, but like any movie or TV UI is a really interesting source of UI innovation, because the user is not the person who sat in front of the computer. The user is the person who sat behind the telly, watching the person using the computer, and so it's got to convey information to the viewer of the program, not to the user of the computer, and so it is much clearer. And people like laugh at those things where like someone's typing away and then it comes up with like downloading and this massive, like modal popover that's got a really slow progress bar going like that. But that's the thing that's going to give us suspense in the film. It's like, oh my god, she's got to sit there for another 2 minutes, and the guy with the gun has just like broken through the door. That's what it's there for. LCARS is a good user interface for the actors, in the same way that the original Star Trek UI, which is just a bunch of like bits of plastic glued to a wooden board, they both give. They both give the benefit that there isn't a button that says fire on it. So the actor can do whatever they want and they have pressed the right button. And the Star Trek like technical manual explains that it's completely configurable user interface, and so each officer can reorganize buttons and reconfigure them for their own preferences, which literally means that whatever button they pressed was the correct button to press. So you don't get nerds writing into Paramount saying, in season 3 Worf pressed this button to fire the torpedoes, and in season 4 episode 7 he pressed that button to fire the torpedoes. Why did you move the torpedo firing button?
Right. Right, because he configured it between seasons.
He configured it, yeah.
Okay, all right. That's what I want, is a computer that just does the right thing when I touch anywhere on the screen.
Yeah, well, and then we ask, why do you need to touch the screen, right?
Well, that's a good question too. But the reason I need to touch on the screen is because every conversation with Siri ends up with "fuck off."
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I've heard of people who have made Siri do their bidding, and for those of you that don't know, I think everyone here probably knows I'm Canadian and I live in Sweden, and I run my computer in Swedish because I thought it would help me learn Swedish, and actually it probably does. And so, but I recently switched Siri back to English because there were a couple of Swedish words that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And Siri, expecting me to speak English, has no fucking clue what I'm doing. And my Swedish is absolutely terrible. I have the wrong accent. I put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable all the time. But when I speak to Siri in Swedish, I have about a 60% hit rate. And in English, I have about a 10% hit rate with Siri. And I have no idea why.
Yeah.
And I've heard that people use Siri and it does the right thing. But I've never seen it work. And I've never been able to get it to work for me. And so if I say, "Hey Siri," then someone else who's listening to this on speakers can now try talking to Siri because I've activated it, and then let me know how it goes for you.
Nice.
But I have no idea how these things work. So I guess touching the screen is a nice, I guess it's the interface we deserve, I guess. But it still would be nice to have something that was. I'm a huge fan of this idea. Like, let's just throw everything away and see what we could come up with. But we really can't throw everything away because we remember what we remember things. I do agree with you about, like, it's not a filing cabinet. These shouldn't be tabs. But I'm not entirely sure what the answer is, and I don't think the answer is, the Slack answer, which is to just put a whole bunch of things on the screen, and some of them are clickable and some of them are not, and I can't tell which ones are not by looking at it.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, I'm not saying.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not saying throw everything away. I'm
No,
saying judiciously throw bits away. So, for example,
yeah,
all of the channels in IRC don't need to be separate timelines. They could be like focuses or searches on a single stream, because actually, like, particularly in Slack, the people tend to overuse channels, right? I've got a a project group where I can't remember off the top of my head how many channels there are, but there are like 3 that are basically for related topics, but it's the same group of people in all 3, and in general, and in random, and in every other chat group. So that just needs to be a unified timeline of people talking to each other, maybe with threaded conversations, or at least highlighted conversations. Or with like tags to say this is about data ingestion, this is about production bugs, this is about whatever.
The channel names are already hashtags.
Exactly. Like, that's my point. Is that the IRC could be presented, but like Twitter makes each message a separate, like, rich chunk with with an avatar and potentially like a card and retweet and reply UI around each one. So that's not good for live chat. But it does have this idea that what I want is a feed from the people I'm trying to communicate with, not a bunch of different rooms I have to go and visit in order to find out what people are talking about.
Yeah, there's a company, I can't remember the name of it, but I got a demo of their product recently, where you give it access to all of your. You have to do some weird thing where you have to give it like admin access to all of the Slacks that you're a member of, or something like that. And what they will give you is the ability to do filtering and curation of what you see. Because most of the Slacks I'm in one Slack for woodworkers, and I want to see everything that comes through the show and tell channel, and I want to see everything that comes through the general channel. I only want to see the random channel when I look for it specifically. And I only want to see things from other channels when somebody mentions me or a certain type of thing that I'm interested in. And I'm in Slacks that I never actually look in unless people are talking to me. And so why is that taking up space on my screen? So I think there's, I think what maybe the, I'm sort of thinking out loud here, but maybe the realization I'm coming to is that I want I want people to be rethinking UI from sort of first principles. What is the best way for this kind of thing to work? But I don't want them to say, let's write our own button from scratch that works nearly exactly the same way as a button that's already free. Right. I think there's room for this improvement, but I think we probably waste a lot of time reinventing the wheel instead of asking, why are we, why don't we have hover cars instead? Like, and maybe that's sort of the thing that I'm struggling with here is I think there's a lot of room for new things. I said on this stream before, I think, but definitely on the other one, and it's an opinion that I've expressed often. A lot of people complained when GNOME 3 changed the entire way that you interact with your computer. They made it activity based, and a lot of people complained and said, "Oh, this is, optimized for touch screens and stuff like that. But the activity-based workflow had some thought behind it, and they said, look, we want to do a new thing.
Yeah.
We want to try a new thing. Now, I don't have an opinion on whether the activity-based workflow in GNOME is good or bad. I don't actually have an opinion. I'm just super fucking happy that they decided to do something completely different. I'm really pleased with that. And I don't care if it's better or worse. I'm just glad somebody is rethinking this.
Yeah, so Matthew Scala brings up a point that sort of dovetails into my thoughts on what you said, which is that he wants control of the UI and for all the UIs for similar things to be the same, and like each app or site, whatever, redefining its own UI breaks both his control and that sort of familiarity or that similarity. The thing that is similar to the activity-based UI that has been introduced and to my knowledge, like 4 times, and has failed economically twice and for management reasons twice, is the sort of task / data. The like you're not using an app, you're using a feature or a component that does the thing that is embedded in your system. So I'm thinking of like the Newton, which is one of the 2 management-based ones. Actually, maybe 3 were management failures and 1 was financial failure. So anyway, Newton, OpenDoc, Windows Metro style. All of those things said, no, we're going to like give you your tasks and you do your things.
Yep.
And if you need to use someone's software to do that, that software will be present and it will be part of that task-based workflow. OpenDoc was probably the first of those. Like maybe Newton was first, but I think probably OpenDoc. And I think OpenDoc was a more complete realization of this, where you said, right there, there isn't a word processor, but if you start a document, you will use a word processing plugin that could be provided by Corel or by Microsoft or by AppleSoft or Claris or whoever. And if you need to edit an image in that, then the image is part of that document, but you'll be using components that are provided by Adobe. And if you want to do some music, etc., etc. And the other one that tried and failed for financial reasons was Taligent, who basically had a very similar sort of object-oriented like component model approach. And I think it is so like GNOME is an incomplete realization of this, because GNOME don't control an entire ecosystem. They control like the default packages that are bundled with GNOME, right? So you can have your terminal, your browser, your file manager, your mail client, your word processor, and your weather app all work in this like activity driven way, and then everything else on your platform doesn't, and you probably aren't going to use that browser anyway. You're going to use Firefox. So like essentially you've got activities until the point where you need to launch an app to do a thing. And that would be a really interesting, like, completely different UI. But as Matthew Scala says, you can't have a couple of developers trying that and everybody else not trying that, because it doesn't work. You're no longer integrated or familiar or or even just like uniform in a sort of friendly way.
Right, and this comes back to what I was saying about sort of Mac apps, which is that you mentioned sort of the mail client, the weather app, the calendar, and so on. On my Mac, the only apps that behave like Mac apps are ones that Apple provided that I use.
Only the ones that Apple provided that they haven't re-implemented in Catalyst yet.
That's also an excellent point, because I see Photos app is in my dock, and I don't use it because it's so shitty to use now, and I stopped using iTunes when it was also re-implemented in Catalyst. Jamie Zawinski had a thing, and I couldn't find it after quick looking, where he said, "Look, if your if he calls it unity of user interface or something like that, where he said, if I have an app that reads email, if I have an app that reads email, it should look a certain way." And if reading RSS is just like reading email, then I should have the exact same user interface for my RSS reader than for my email. And so I kind of agree with that. One of the real bugs up my arse lately is that I subscribe to some streaming services, basically all of them. HBO and Netflix and a few others, and then Seymour is the Swedish one that I have to get to watch Swedish hockey and things like that. And every single one of all I care about, the only reason I subscribe to those streaming services is to have access to the content that they have licenses for. It's the only reason I subscribe to that. That's the only reason anyone subscribes to. But they have all made their own video player that behaves slightly differently than every other video player, and they have to behave slightly differently than every other video player. The HBO Nordic video player has to be shitty in certain ways because they'd be stepping on a Netflix patent if it wasn't. And all I want is one video player that knows how to reach out to the streaming services to get the content I want. And this is before you even get into the arguments about DRM and all of this shit that I also don't like. But all of those applications have re-implemented from scratch a thing that should be very basic and should work exactly the same every single time, and regardless of what kind of video I'm watching. And maybe I want one kind of video. Maybe I want some features on, when I'm watching TV shows that I don't want when I'm watching a movie. Maybe in a movie, or maybe in like TV shows, I want an easy way to say, I've watched this episode, please skip to the next episode. And you don't have that in a movie necessarily. Or things like that. But these things all of these companies are re-implementing. They're spending all their time or a lot of time re-implementing a thing that they should basically all be sharing. I think I've shared the same complaint about public transit applications. There are like 20 different public transit applications which are nearly identical in Sweden, and the only thing that's different is where those buses, which region those buses exist in, and what colors and logo are in the app. Why are there 20 different code bases for this thing, especially when all of those 20 different regions are getting the funding for building that application from the same place?
Right, and then probably spending it with the same agency as well.
I actually happen to know that to be true, because I know some people who have worked on the Skåne Trafiken app in particular, and they're also responsible for doing other applications. And so the same agency is getting paid multiple times for re-implementing stuff. And each one works slightly differently, and I don't give a shit for it to work slightly differently. I care very much for it to work exactly the same. Right,
if you dig into, what is the best way for a public transit app to work, the answer is improve the transit service. If I need to work out when the next bus is, it's because there aren't enough buses.
Well, right. But the other thing is that I think is important is that I've ridden public transit all over the world in countries that speak different languages and have different cultures and things like that. I can't imagine that there are that many variations on how a public transit app should work. If we accept for a minute that they should exist at all. I can't imagine how, why the public transit app for this region of Sweden that I happen to be in today should be different than the public transit app for, London.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
I can't imagine how those can be usefully different.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the sort of best answer for that, which is one UI, multiple feeds, has unfortunate business implications associated with it, i.e. Apple and Google become the providers of your public transit experience because they're the only people who are allowed to do one UI multiple feeds in a sort of integrated way.
In a lot of ways, they are now, because I open up my iPhone and I look for directions to get somewhere, and I choose the public
Yeah,
transit
exactly.
option, and then it just gives me the app to download.
Yeah.
So in many ways, they already are that. And there's not a big, there's not going to be, if we just said, okay, here's the Open Transit API specification, which may actually already exist. Skånetrafiken, which is the public transit service in the south of Sweden, they're actually really good about open data and stuff. There are a bunch of open source and third party applications that are free, that interact with the data that they provide. They're actually really good at providing the data, but I still need to use their application to get my ticket, because the ticket is all on the phone now. And because of COVID, you actually don't have a way of paying for your ticket without using the app. And you can't say, well, okay, well, we're just going to provide this information and hope the open source community fixes it for us. And what it requires is a whole bunch of these companies getting together and saying, okay, look, we only want to pay for the development of one system. And in public transit, that might work, but Netflix wants their player to be better than HBO's player, because then you go to Netflix. I do this too. When I want to watch TV and I don't know what I want to watch, I go to Netflix first, because I know that one's going to give me the best user experience. When I want to watch something specific that I happen to know is on another streaming service, that's when I open their app and I suffer through the experience. So I think there's a lot of interesting work to be done here, but I don't know who's doing it or where, or even where it could be done, really. Because, capitalism prevents it.
Well, it could be done right on this stream, and I don't know whether anyone remembers, because it's been so long since we actually did any coding. But our last thing was we made a laughably trivial change to SimpleAgenda that enabled it to communicate with Nextcloud Calendar. And that worked, except that you had to point directly at the calendar resource, and you couldn't use the auto discovery, like the well-known address feature, or just the "here is my user principal, now tell me what my calendar is" discovery in the caldav and webdav protocol. So we, I think, wanted to move on that and do the sort of auto direction discovery thing in SimpleAgenda, right?
Yes. So now, on the heels of that last stream, I actually read up on the whole well-known system.
I'm glad one of us did. I'm glad it wasn't me, because I would feel bad if I had read about all of that and then forgotten all of the content.
Yeah. Guess what? I remember reading through the specification, which was a short one. I think it was like 15 pages or something. I don't even remember where I found it at this point, because it was several weeks ago. And so now I'm looking for it again. So okay, I think I might have found something. I will post a link when I find it. This is, for those of you following along, well-known URIs is an IANA thing where you go to a website /.well-known, and then it gives you all of the services that are provided by that server. And it's actually for caldav and cardav, it's in the caldav and cardav RFC. So I'm gonna paste some links into stream chat. So there's one link, and then there is the RFC for locating things. Yeah. Oh, well, I remembered one thing. It is 15 pages. That's one thing I remembered. That's good. Nope, it is 13 pages. All right, and all right, it's even shorter than I thought. That's fantastic. So I've linked the RFC in the chat.
Cool.
And there are two ways to get, three ways. You can use the SRV DNS record. You can use the TXT DNS record as well. But the one that I think is going to be the useful one is the well-known URI.
Yeah. What I was looking for, which might have been a bad idea, was where the sort of sources. I think we're gonna have to step through the debugger to find out where the thing does the thing. So let's have a look at this. Right. So well-known URIs is a URI scheme where you basically say, like, my calendar is at domain name /.wellknown /calendar or something like that, and then that does it redirect, or does it do or is it a property?
I think it gives you a
lookup?
list. I think it gives you a list of URIs where you can find things. I'm actually trying to hit it in a web browser for my own thing, and it requires me to be logged in, which then doesn't give me the well-known. It's possible that I did have the .wellknown thing working, and it's possible that I have messed it up since then. So let's go in here. So it says in the RFC, these URIs point to a resource that the client can use as the initial context path for the service they are trying to connect to.
Mm-hmm.
The server must redirect HTTP requests for that resource to the actual context path using one of the available mechanisms provided by HTTP, using either a 301, 303, or 307 response. Clients must handle HTTP redirects on a well-known URI. Servers must not locate the actual caldav or cardav service endpoint at the .wellknown URI, so it must be a redirect. Servers should set an appropriate cache control header, and yeah, okay. So a caldav server, the client will use .wellknown. There we go. .wellknown /caldav as the path. And I'm pretty sure when you curl that using the username and password, it comes back with the 302, and it's the same thing that we got when we said, "Give me the path."
Can you remember what your?
I know the login is GNU step. I'm pretty sure
like
the
password something or other.
Yep, ITEQUIG123.
I also can't remember what the URL is. So do you want to carry on typing into the terminal window?
Absolutely. It should be. No, it's colon.
Yeah.
At cloud.steven.
Oh, you've got com wrong.
Oh, whoops. I've got a slight typing lag here. .wellknown /cal. That should give us a redirect. I'm not seeing it yet. Oh.
No.
All right.
So while we're waiting for that, we had a great experience on the Amiga stream the other day. We often have problems where, because we use various like remote access technologies, one of us can't type into the computer. And we were able to get around this using C trigraphs, which is the first time I've ever used C trigraphs in production. Because you couldn't type curly brackets, but you could type question mark, pointy bracket.
Yes. Yeah, and I didn't even know those things existed. And it turns out that one of the stated reasons for their existence is Scandinavian keyboards.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
So because there are 3 extra letters in the Swedish alphabet.
So this is now given us a redirect to that URI. If we now do this, do we get a calendar back? I don't think we do.
I thought we got a 302 to somewhere else.
Oh,
It needs to be
a prop find request.
prop find.
Yeah, okay, so we get a bunch of stuff. Oh, and I remember we had to do a particular request in order to get the calendar at this point.
Right.
I don't remember what that request was.
I think prop get, perhaps.
Oh, there's no key repeat on there. No, I don't. It's got no key repeat on that terminal. That's weird. And what was the property?
I do not remember. That is not going to be in this RC. It's in the card.
Yeah, I was just
in the caldav RC.
I was just looking at this section on client bootstrap to see whether it gave us enough information.
Ah.
Client bootstrapping procedures for a caldav server. A calendar user address and a password.
The user info and host portion of the URI is extracted. Okay. Yeah, we're already doing that, I think.
Determination of initial context path is the bit that we've just done with the .well-known URI. Mm-hmm.
There we go. The client does a prop find request with the request URI sent to the initial context path. The body of the request should include dav current user principal. That was the
thing
that we ended up doing last time. Yeah. Can't remember how to form that how we formed that. This bit, SimpleAgenda already does.
Okay, so let's have a look here.
So I think if we look for current user principal in the code. No, I've
got a feeling we ended up doing this bit manually until the point where we got to a calendar URI, and then we ended up pasting that calendar URI into SimpleAgenda. We can probably find out from the... Right. Because I made some notes in the issue.
Ah, yes. Yes, you did.
Which is now closed.
It's in that one, number 4. Oh, okay, I've got a bit of a lag. So
right, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we had to give it this thing, but what I didn't write down was how we got to this thing.
Right. And I remember we were manipulating whatever was in SimpleAgenda that was doing and parsing some of the and pulling out in sort of debugging info, printing out what it got back.
Yeah.
And then I think we were modifying the code of SimpleAgenda for its discovery. So why don't we look at where SimpleAgenda adds a calendar and see if we can work backwards from there.
Yeah, okay. Have I built it? Yeah. I do want to do that. Now I've got my key auto repeat back. Weird.
Oh, fantastic.
I think it's calendar factory, isn't it? Group dev.
Yeah, I think so.
Core at Nextcloud. Yeah, here we go. And what was the cloud?
Cloud.stephenrbaker.com.
So what we want to be able to do is that. I mean, actually, what we want to be able to do is not that, and for it to infer that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it says that there are no paths.
Right.
So what we want to do is,
as a recall, if you type in /dev/calendar/user,
yeah. Is it /user or /GNU step?
It will give the list. I think it's /GNU step. Yeah, I think it's the username.
Yeah,
and it should give us personal, I think.
Well, it said prop find 4 or 5 methods are not allowed.
Okay, so it's in WebDAV resource request with method body attributes.
Yeah, that is the thing that does the builds the HTTP request. What we need to do is find out where that is called from.
Right.
Which we can do by, let's just quit that. I'll make a debug version. We want to store that information somewhere. Oh, stupid scrolling. All right, I'll wait for it to finish building. It's probably in Group Dev Store, isn't it?
Yep, that is my guess.
Yeah, okay, well, let's have a look. And what was that thing called?
WebDAV resource. So it's called here either underscore calendar. That one, yeah.
Yeah, so we want
yeah.
calendar request. Okay, so nothing calls calendar request method. That's quite an annoying set of. Nothing in there calls request with method.
Okay.
Maybe it's installed.
So it's calling it from the store instance.
Oh, okay. So right, so it's only used internal to that class. Whoops. Okay, so right, it's probably this prop find one. I mean, it was prop find that failed, right?
Right. Yep.
I think.
So it'll be
prop find.
Yeah.
So if in that other file. Here we go.
There it is.
Yeah, I remember this. So it uses the the editor delegate method to go and do the network action, which is an interesting choice, but which is one we have. And here's its body. And then it's
It's
looking
like,
for event collection, to do collection, and calendar in the response.
right, because it's looking for it's expecting to find a calendar resource, not a list of calendars. And that's sort of the feature. I guess that is the point of the feature we want to add, is that we want to get it to find a list of calendars.
No, I think it's finding a list of finding a list of calendars, because it gives you that pop down, that pop up, right, or drop down.
Right.
What we were trying to do is to work out
all of the redirects.
Yeah,
so
what we need to do is to work out what collection of HTTP requests we need to make, given the well-known URL, to get to the point where this chunk here will succeed.
Right. Right. So when we do a GET request, I forget now, when we did the GET request on the well-known thing, it gave us a redirect.
Yeah.
And then we need to do a prop find with this body on the thing that it redirected us to.
Well, that's a good question. So, yeah, we did a GET there, and we got the 301. And I imagine if we did a prop find there, we would also get
prop find. And yeah, so you want prop find and then -d with that string from the file.
You're pointing at me.
Yeah, I'm pointing at the fucking screen. Yeah,
this one.
With that, with this string. So -d, and then that string.
Right.
In a string.
Yeah.
And that sets the post body, but our prop find is a post. Small d, I think. Oh. So you want to do the prop find request.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah. X
on
prop
this
find
URL.
and then -d. Yeah. There we go. You want curl -x prop find, and then after that, before the URL, actually that probably works too, and then the string from the file.
Because that has weird characters in it, so I'll need to single quote it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, but that's got back quotes in it, so I need to double quote it.
Ah, right. Yeah, because it's already escaped for us, right? Username and password in the URL.
Oh, yeah. Sweet. Right.
Okay. Now, does that have anything? Yeah, we can reformat that, and it'll be nice. Oh, the drawing on my VNC connection is really slow. Okay.
But so we get
here, we get a 200, and then we get a bunch of 404s, but that... there's one. There's a 200 OK on remote DAV calendars.
Yeah. But what about this tells us that it is... it's a collection of calendars. But nothing tells us this is the collection of calendars any more than or less than that this is also a collection, but is a collection of principles.
Right. But it's because it can give us multiple collections. There's also system calendars, which is a 200.
Calendars.
and public calendars. So it is giving us a list of calendars that we can look at.
Well, it's giving us a list of collections, is my point, and I can't see how we distinguish, like what makes us know that we don't want to look at this one, and we don't want to look at this one, and we do want to look at this one. Like, this is a collection of principles. Well, sorry, this collection is named principles. And this collection is named files. And this collection is named calendars. And we are looking for calendars. Is there a way that we can restrict the search so that we only get calendars?
That was where we got this is where we got to last time.
Right.
In the I'm pointing at my screen again.
I know.
In here, can you see the mouse when I move it?
Yes.
Okay, so in here, the XML, this says we're saying give us the DAV root, and we want that to be DAV calendars principle or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I don't have key repeat. I don't think. We're just gonna do I have meta F? I do not. So we're just gonna go. Hey, there we go. This is the one.
Wow, that must be really frustrating. That I can hear the buttons and I can't see anything happening on them.
Yeah. Are you able to go word by word to where it says DAV colon? And then I'm gonna look up in this RFC. It's
no, I haven't got key repeat. I think it might be VNC messing up.
Okay, so this one says we connect it, and it says DAV current user principal property as one of the properties to return. That's not the one we want. Or maybe it is DAV current user principal. Hang on. I'm reading this again. The client does a prop find request with the request URI set to the initial context path. So the initial context path is why it's giving us back files and a whole bunch of other shit, because those are all the web dev stuff. Yeah. So what we want is I forget where we found this now. Caldav list calendars.
We need to get that O'Reilly book from like 100 years ago and just have it.
Right. I'm just gonna go over here.
Yeah, it's better to do it here.
And do the searching that I'm doing. It is actually it looks like there is a calendar CLI program that does the things we want it to do. And I'm hoping that this has a please list the calendars usage examples. Oh, I scrolled past them. The commands and options will be described further below. Okay. Let's see here. Further below. Keep going further below. Commands. Here we go. Calendar. Add. Subcommands. List. No, that's on to do. I do not see a list for calendar.
No.
Okay, that is not what I'm looking for then. So let's go in here. I remember we found this really great documentation. I can't remember the URL for, which was like a C# guide for integrating caldav list calendars. Calendar's right. Oh no.
It was all the right letters.
Yeah, that's often enough in modern search engines.
Mm.
So, caldav list calendars.
Well, so actually, that Stack Overflow one, the card on the right says it does say this is typically how you do discovery in
Yep.
caldav. So that's probably.
Yep, that I think might be how we got there last time.
I mean, you're right. We found like some. Feel welcome to accept the cookies. It's just some private investment capital firm now.
Right. Okay, so do a prop find on the URL the user supplied, requesting dev current user principal. Using this URL, you do a prop find to find out more information about the user. There it is. Calendar home set in the caldav namespace. I remember all of this now. I don't remember what we did with it, but I do remember reading this answer and putting us in the right direction.
Scroll up to that that example code. So that is how you do the. Sorry, I'm now pointing at the screen. Yeah, this
go ahead.
Tells us that this person has already got the calendar home set namespace, and here is their request that they got it with. And so that's the request they made on the principal.
Right.
Do they say how they got the principal? Right, okay, yeah, this is... But that is, again, using... there's a jumping on point here.
Right.
But can we use... Can we use that body on this URL? Is that what we want to do? No.
No.
Well, yes, I mean, we can. It's not necessarily a good idea. Or rather, it's probably not any different from what we are currently doing, but we can replace all of this with all prop. And then we have done the same thing as that person.
Yes. And it's see, this one says where I'm pointing at my screen. Here it says, if I extract all of the elements where resource type is calendar, and we weren't asking for resource type in our property list. We were asking for get last modified.
Sorry, just mouse over to Emacs a second.
Oh, the delay is brutal. And I think this was happening last time too. Prop.
So I got something wrong in...
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it was only getting the get last modified property. We're now asking it, please show us all of the properties. And hopefully... Oh, no, it's resource type. Is it saying resource type collection?
See if... So what's resource type calendar? Let's have a look for the string calendar. Yeah, so again, that is resource type collection. As is that. As is that. And then we've wrapped round.
Right. Okay. And then, so yeah, we've got collections. I think we possibly, what if we go back to the web browser and see if it has the query to get everything where resource type is calendar. Yeah. That's in one of the examples. Or I think we got some luck with this calendar home set thing. I just don't remember that sound. That's ringing a bell. I just don't remember how. There it is. There, the principal match. That one.
Yeah.
I'm pointing at my screen.
Yeah.
This one here.
Yeah.
Principal match. Dav root, where the property calendar home set. Although that's using some. Yeah, I believe this is what we're looking for. We want calendar home set.
Okay, let's
I think that's it.
let's take that.
So
and over. Oops.
Yeah.
Oh no! Don't do that. There.
Did you command copy from? There we go. Okay.
So we want this.
Yes.
But we want the body to be... Oh, I'm going to have to remove all those quotes as well, aren't I? Right, yeah, okay. So that... goes there. I'm just going to get rid of these quotes. Oops. Oh. And that goes there. And then that, blimey. Oh, I've got my key repeats back. Sweet. That goes there. Okay, that didn't work. Oh.
Okay, so the current, the pacing was weird. It might be better, I guess, to get it in Emacs on a single line.
Or there'll be a curl for not doing the not doing this shit on the command line, but doing it from a file.
Oh, let me see here. Curl host body from file. Aha. -D.
Yeah.
Open quote. At. Path
Okay.
to file name.
Right.
Close quote.
Cool.
Oh, this is much better because now we can use the same command and just edit the file.
Yeah.
And
Come on.
did we get
Meta X. Come on. Give me Meta X. Revert. Buffer. Yes.
string
Okay,
not
so it's
starting?
So it's still bad. Line 1, column 15.
Okay.
Stop. Oh, what's happened now? My meta key isn't working. Ah, right, now we don't need to escape all these quotes.
Oh, right.
Because
it's a proper file, right?
Yeah,
You can just replace string /quote with
that is true.
quote. Meta X replace string.
Yeah?
That looks right to me. Yeah, that looks right to me.
It looks right to XML mode as well.
Maybe when Emacs was highlighting it in red, we should have took the hint.
Yeah, well, yeah, I didn't. Oh, yeah, no, what? Expected dav prop find but received dav principal match as the root element.
Okay, so that's not what I was hoping to see.
No.
Okay. So I was just reading something that was interesting.
This does a report. This example does a report method, not a prop find method.
Okay.
That's all of these like 300 character files make me think that they're all just error reports.
Yeah.
No. Just empty.
Okay. Well, we want to change the message or change the outcome, and we've changed the message at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So what this says is that URL is. I think what this tells us is that this URL doesn't have any calendars.
Right. Now, when we curled the well-known, and you can probably get it in the bash history.
Yeah.
What came back there? It gave us a redirect to something.
Yeah. Although when we did this, yes, so we get a 301.
We got a redirect to and that was the okay.
And that's what we were doing this on.
Right. Okay. So. So this thing in Stack Overflow says do a prop find on the URL the user specified, requesting current user principal.
Okay.
I wonder if we do current user principal on the URL that came back in the redirect. And the link from, if you scroll.
Sorry.
And it links to the RFC that says how to do a thing to get the current user principal. And then it says then you're doing a prop find to find more information about the user. So I think you want this one, the all prop one, but instead of all prop, current -user -principal.
Okay. No, let's forget that. Right. So we don't want any of this.
No, we want.
This wants to be a prop find.
Yeah. So the prop find one for all prop, and I think we want current user principal under the prop find. Yeah. So prop find XML namespace is dav : and then where you have d self, we want
current user principal.
Current -user -principal.
Yeah.
And we probably want d current user principal. Although we can omit the namespace if you pull it out of the XML and S at the top, because it is the root namespace.
Right.
And then we don't want any of that, and then close prop find.
Yeah.
That's open.
That's...
Nope. You need a slash. Yep.
Yeah, got it.
There we go. I learned something when I moved to Sweden about where the slashes in the HTML tags come from.
Okay.
When you're leaving a town in a European country,
Yeah.
The going into the town has the picture, the the emoji for a city and the name
Yeah.
of the city,
Mm.
and when you're leaving, it has a slash through it.
All right. Okay.
And so if you picture that slash going diagonally from the bottom left of prop find to the top right of prop find,
Right.
that's what the leaving the city sign would look like.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was amusing.
And the command key, it has the Swedish like
Yeah, it's a Swedish symbol
point
for
of interest. Yeah, the emoji. Yep. So maybe the Swedes just invented Steve Jobs.
There was the story of how that happened. Was basically someone looked through the character set and found one she didn't recognize. It was a very short story and kind of interesting.
One thing I'm going to do...
I love those kinds of stories.
Quickly is make a folder that isn't in temp.
Good idea.
Right. Okay, so nice D quote at and then there should be a file in here called current user principal query. And we'll current user principal response. And now we'll actually keep our documentation between between episodes of the stream.
Streams.
I know.
It's an excellent. That's a much needed improvement.
Oh. Current user principal response. That document is moved as well. Ah, that's because I did it on... No, that's because I did it on the wrong URI.
Oh. So the first thing we need to do with SimpleAgenda is have it follow redirects.
Yeah.
That is sort of step 0, is make sure it follows redirects.
Yeah, and actually we could probably stop exploring there and just do that now, because that will be in that webdav whatever the .m file was called.
Oh, right, the webdev resource. Right.
Yeah.
So when it gets the response back, if
a 301.
If the response is a 301, then we
try to request again on the...
Yep.
Should be able to revert buffer on that. Yes. We finally get something back.
Okay.
Let's,
does it just say collection, though, or does it say calendars?
It says collections. Collection of calendars.
Where does it say collection of calendars?
Here. Sorry, it says collection. But yeah.
Right.
Collection.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we still have to do a thing where we get the property of this thing. We get a prop find on the user principal. Hi Greg, who just turned up in chat.
Hello Greg.
So yeah, we've still got to work out what our query is that gets us only calendar properties on the principal.
Yeah. So this one, this answer, the number 1 answer, step 2 says, using the URL we get from current user principal.
Right.
When we do the current user principal request, we do a prop find to find more information about the user. Here, you should typically request the calendar home set property in the caldav namespace.
I don't see that we are getting a
home set. Yeah.
Well, I don't see that. I don't see that we are getting a URL for the user principal either.
Right.
We're getting. There is a collection of principles, but that's not the same as getting the URL for the.
Right. Can I look at that query again?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And we're asking for current user principal. Right. So current user principal, it says, okay. It says using this URL, do a prop find to find out more information about the user. Here, you should typically request for the calendar home set property in the caldav namespace. So I think we need to modify this query to look for the calendar home set property.
Okay, right.
But how do you do that?
Yeah, but I'm going to quickly reformat that. Oh, that's not helpful. Thank you.
Do a quick
That's
Google with DuckDuckGo over here. Let's see. Aha. Okay. So the namespace, it says the purpose of the caldav calendar home set property. The purpose is to identify the URL of any WebDAV collections that contain calendar collections. So that is exactly what we're looking for. And so this is where we need the D in front of, and then the C for caldav.
We need to know what that.
And your XML is way better than mine, because I have no idea what
I'm
that is.
teaching a course.
That should be caldav. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm teaching a course on structured data next week. So XML, XML path, XSLT, but also JSON linked data schema, and all that kind of stuff. So XML is my strong point. But okay, so what is the? So is that caldav?
That is caldav,
right.
Is my understanding. Yep, caldav colon. Yep. Okay, and then I just found example in Rust code. I'm going to put it in the chat. That actually talks about using the calendar home set.
Oh, well, that'd be even easier to reason about.
Yes. It's a Medium post called Rust caldav client from scratch. And
nice.
The first thing they do is request the principal. And then the second thing they do, they request the principal. And then the second thing they do is they do the calendar home set.
Okay. That's quite a big chunk of...
I think this... that's good.
If it's the same fucking stuff... It is. It's the same list of collections.
It is, because it has files in it. What a fucking pain in the ass. Can you go back to the query? I'm comparing it to this link to the Rust thing, and the query looks slightly different.
Okay.
Actually, quite a lot different. If you open that link that I put in the chat...
Yeah, but now I both have to open a Medium link and look at some Rust code. This is not going to be my favorite episode of the stream.
It does have the XML we need. I'm pretty sure.
That's because...
The exact XML we need.
That's because statically typing your text files helps you reason about them.
Right. So if you go, it does the first step, and then the second step is calendar home set. It's like 2/3 of the way down, I think.
It suddenly loaded some formatting in the middle. Okay, so that's the thing that we were trying to do, right?
Yep.
Well, actually, okay, so this has done a different thing. Yep. We did dprop find and just put current user principal in that, but it's wrapping it in this d prop.
Oh.
Did we?
Oh, well, let's try that first.
I don't think we did. Okay. Yeah, we've got... I realise that this is no different, but I'm just trying to make the two things look balls look roughly the same. Oh, stop! MetaX repaginate has weird ideas about what repagination. See, if I just do that, okay, right. So it's got a decolon prop around it, and that needs a decolon as well. Right. That one.
And it was more than 300 characters.
It's good. Right. I'm revert buff.
The redraw is slower on VNC. I think this happened last week too than it is on the stream.
Okay, sweet. Because now we've got the current user principal URL, which is what we were aiming for.
There we go. Yep.
Nice. Okay, so now if we do the calendar home set query, do you know what?
In the same way that they describe under dprop, but there's a namespace that you'll want to copy and paste because it's really long.
Well, the first thing I want to do is remote period down principals users GNU step. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's save that because that is the one we want. Calendar home set query.xml.
Mm-hmm.
So
and if you search for the string in the Medium article, prop find space calendar dash home dash set, you'll find it. Actually, you're almost there.
Yeah,
there it is. Yep. And so that chunk of XML is what we get to get the set of calendars for that user. Oh yeah, we totally want to tweet this text selection.
Yeah.
I fucking hate Medium.
What is it complaining about now?
It is complaining about... I have no idea.
Who knows? Alright, let's try running the query because it might work. It might not work. Oh. Okay, let's...
Yeah. Quote pasta error, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Online.
Oh, is this has got smart quotes in it?
Oh, for fuck. It was even telling us exactly where they were.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's try that again.
There we go.
Oh, that's a different size response.
Well, that's always good.
That's it. Is it?
There we go.
Yeah, there's the read URL and write URL, which is an interesting thing because SimpleAgenda is expecting one URL for the...
yeah, which is just the first one, the home set URL. So the next step, when you get the home set URL, is,
right, yes, I see.
Is to prop find on... okay, we get...
That's the thing that SimpleAgenda already does. So I think we've done everything that we.
Yes.
It's.
Yeah. Yeah. So once we give that director that first link, not the proxy read, proxy write ones, that first
one up
to
here.
SimpleAgenda, it will give us the it does everything from there.
Okay, so we have 2 tasks. It is now like 10 minutes past.
It is past.
So I'm going to suggest we call it, but just note that our 2 tasks next week are 1, redirects on the WebDAV resource, and 2, those 2 queries in the group DAV store, so that we can go from. And in fact, then we could just ask, like, as you said earlier, we can just ask, what is the host name of your calendar server, and then we can do append the .well-known or do the DNS text record. That's probably feature 3 is the DNS server and text records to find it.
Yeah, I think so. The server and text records give you the well-known URL, and then we can go from there, which is and we can just make maybe a new. There's the different stores. We can have like an auto discovery store.
Oh,
instead
okay.
of group dev store, right? So we just create a new store that does you give it a host name and a username and password, and then we go through this list of steps to get your list of
and then we actually create a group dev store and off the back of that, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Okay, so this was frustrating, but I think really good progress. We now know the steps. Yeah. Do you want to write those down? Or you can do it off stream if you want, but I think this should be written down. Do we want to create an org file?
Yeah. So I've saved all of the queries and responses, so we can like recover that and and understand how to interpret them when we come back to it. Plan.org. Oh, 3 x's. Current user principal.
Calendar home set.
Yeah.
Right. Current user principal, and then the calendar home set.
Yeah. Oh.
Perfect.
So anything else in
that looks great.
Nice. Okay.
Nope, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, so I think that we have. Sorry, you carry on.
No, I was just going to say that's great, and we can call it.
Okay. Yeah. I think we have learned this twice, which is something that tells us about our documentation approach. So we have written it down this time, which means we won't need to learn it again next week. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. I apologize for 60.3% of frames getting dropped on the way out of my computer.
Ouch.
Yeah. So, I don't know whether that means that you only watched like the first third of the stream or whether that meant that you only got 20 frames per second. But either way, it's not very good.
Right. Okay, I do have one thing to add. This is from my wife's suggestion. Please put square brackets around the like and subscribe buttons and send a message to them.
Nice.
I think that worked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We were. What was the thing I came up with? That I came up with some incredibly inappropriate phrase. Like Davey504 says, "Slap the like button," because he's a bass player.
Right.
I don't remember what it was.
Awesome.
Yeah. Please send a message to the subscribe button.
There we go. See you next week.
See you next week.